Working with filled tubing, also known as rouleau, is not as difficult as it looks. You can create simple motifs or you can create complex motifs, but it all works the same way. And that's what we're going to cover. We have a lot to do, so let's get busy. As you can see, I have this little sample of a vest section prepared. I've laid down the piping first. It's really good to lay the piping down first, then you know where your seams are and where your margins are. So what I have done, I've worked ahead and I have prepared a pounce pattern. And what this is, as you can see, it's a series of little holes poked into the paper with the sewing machine. So this motif here is what I want to mark on the fronts. So what you're going to do here, bring this in a little bit, you're going to line up that stitching line. So you're going to line up the stitching line on the paper with the piping on the garment. And I'm going to pin it a couple places so I don't have to worry about it shifting around. And zoom that in a little more. There we are. And this is a pounce pad. You could also use chalk in a tube sock. This is the fancy version of this particular tool. And the powder that I have in here, because this is powder, this is what they use in skirt hem markers. It's a white powder that disappears when you steam it. So now the object here is to rub that on the paper, and then, ta-da, we have everything marked. So I'm going to be using these marks to sew the tubing down to the garment. This is not terribly complicated, sewing this down. So what I have done here is I've cut a length of the filled tubing, and whenever possible, so you have the seam here, whenever possible, when you stitch it, you want to stitch it with the seam against the fabric. So I cut more than I need. And I want to find the center because I'm going to start with the center of the motif. And you could even pin it in place if you wish, which I'm going to do. Some of this is going to be like watching paint dry, but it'll be fascinating overall. Okay, so you would decide how these all land, but I like to work it, pin it as I'm going. I like to pin some and stitch and then pin some more. So I'm going to work in sections. So now the sewing, the stitching is really, it's a hand stitch. I'm using a double thread. I just like it better. And really, you just come up right next to the cord, and then you stitch at an angle. So the stitch really ends up underneath the cord so that the cord hides the stitching. And I like to stitch it every 1/4 inch or so. I'm not going to make you watch me stitch all of this. I'm going to close this stitch and then I'll go off camera and sew the first loop. But it's just good to see. See, the object here is that you want the stitches to be underneath the cord so that the cord holds, well, it holds the cord in place, but it also hides the stitches. And then from the back side, it looks something like this. This is going to be faced or lined, so you don't have to really worry about what all of this looks like on the back. So I'm going to sew around the first loop. I will bring the work back here so you can see the result. Okay, I have gotten around the first loop. And so now what we want to do is figure out where everything else goes. So I'm going to bring this loop around here. And again, make sure the seam hides as best you can against the ground fabric. So I will pin this in place. Now all of this chalk, just to know, just to say it again, once we steam this all out, the chalk will disappear. So we don't have to worry about getting the chalk out of the fabric with this particular technique. Okay, so here, now this here, what I want to do next is sew around to here, but I'm going to stop right about here because the object here is we want to hide this end. So we're going to cut this off and we're going to pull the cover back and cut the cord off right there, which will give us just fabric. So there, you have to think about where you're going to end these, where you're going to put the ends and how you're going to finish them. And so I'm going to finish this end by putting this underneath this cord here. So first, I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to sew this around to here, and I will bring it back and show you the result. Okay, so we have gotten this around here. So I'm going to flip this over and just secure this. Don't have to break the thread, but I like to secure it with a couple of stitches before the next step. Okay, so here, so like I said, I want to bury the end in there. So first, I'm going to cut this off right about there. So then I'm going to pull this back, the cover back to here, and trim off the fill. So that thins that out so that I don't have a huge bump. And so from here, I'm going to come back in. I didn't really stitch. I left a few stitches open in here. So I'm going to come in there. So I've made a little slit. And next I'm going to introduce you to a wonderful little tool called the hemostat. This is the wonderful tool called the hemostat. It's like a tweezers. They have different size jaws. This is a very fine one. So how this is going to work, I'm going to feed that through this little slash that I made. And grab that and pull it through to the back. Voila. So then from the back here, I can make a little stitch there, and I can come in and secure the ends against the canvas. See what that does is it makes it so that this stays inside. And if you stitch it to your canvas, trim it off, voila. So we are halfway there. And then this here, the next one, in the next step, this is going to come here, and I will bury it right there. I'm almost around on the other side of this motif. It's not looking bad at all, I have to say. Okay, so there we are. And again, as we did on the last one, make a few stitches. And I'm going to make a little slash right there. And cut that off. And again, pull the cover back from the fill. And with the hemostat, reach through. Pull it through. And then I would stitch it as I did the other one. So just to show you the result here, let's zoom this out a little bit. So there's going to be a little variation, but what you can do after, which I'll show you in a few minutes, is you can steam this and just kind of press everything and pat it down so that it matches. So I'm going to secure this end. I'm also going to sew this motif, and I will bring you back the results. Okay. Second one is finished. And here is the result. Our next step will be going over to the pressing table just to sort of massage everything and smooth it out a little bit. So I'll meet you at the pressing table. And here we are. This is where you can set everything. And this now is ready to apply the facing to. And here we have the front with the facing on. There are the frogs, or motifs, whatever you care to call them. Then again, piping, because piping is next to godliness. And you can see, turning it over this way, there is the facing. And just so you can see what it looks like on the inside, that's what it looks like on the inside. It's not going to be pretty, but it's going to be lined, or there's going to be a facing, so you don't really see that. And that is a brief tutorial on how to use filled tubing in a project.